Celeste. This game is widely considered as one of the best story-driven platformers ever made. With its amazing narrative overflowing with personality and charm, its challenging yet satisfying gameplay, and its beautiful environments and especially music. But Celeste didn't just materialize out of nowhere. No, there was a person behind this game, as well as a history to go along with it. Introducing Maddy Thorson. Maddy is an incredibly talented Canadian video game developer who was born in early 1988. And while Celeste is by far her most easily recognizable and beloved game ever made, it wouldn't be her first, not by a long shot. So, with that being said, welcome to a brief history lesson on Maddy Thorson. To see Maddy's humble beginnings, we'll have to travel all the way back to when she was only around 14 or so, as that is when her mom bought her a copy of Game Maker Studio, starting it all. Maddy's early projects in life would pretty heavily influence her future projects, with her making games under the name Helix Games, and the first notable project of hers being made in the year 2004. Introducing Jumper. Jumper is actually pretty fun. That is, if you ignore the sound design though, as it leaves quite a bit to be desired. There's almost no information about this game, but from what I can tell, this is what influenced Maddy Thorson into creating platformers. I mean, it is literally called Jumper. Jumper utilizes different rooms for different obstacles with a main character known as 𝓶𝓪𝓰𝓲𝓬. Look at the little guy. Actually, no, don't just look at him, look at the entire game. It's definitely got a charming aesthetic. Almost Microsoft Paint-like in a way. A far cry to her usual aesthetic of pixel art which started in Jumper 2. For her first game, we can already sort of see elements of her future projects established due to these similar genres. Speaking of, we should probably take a deeper dive into what exactly the platformer genre is. Jump and run games, commonly referred to as platformers, is a genre of games where the player controls a character that moves through levels by jumping over obstacles or terrain, typically to reach an end goal of sorts. Platformers, in a way, are Maddy's genre. If you take a look at basically all of her game releases, all of them are, or at the very least have significant resemblance to stereotypical platformers, each with some sort of twist. Jumper, whilst being a finicky experience, acts as the catalyst for almost all of Maddy's future projects, with the aspect of platforms, jumping around, and pulling off cool movement techniques being a mainstay. Speaking of movement techniques, let's move on to Maddy Thorson's next important game, Towerfall, which was released in mid-2013 for the Ouya microconsole. By this point in her life, the games Maddy would create already had her key aesthetic style in pixel art and main genre in platformers. That being said, Towerfall is still vastly different to Celeste, as it has no story and is instead a platformer battle royale party game. Before we dive into what exactly Towerfall is and why it's so important, I want to take a moment to really appreciate the aesthetic design of Towerfall. Mise-en-scène-wise, there is a lot to unpack here, from the controlled pixelated texturing on the floors, the contrasting colors for the background walls, and even the lighting of the scene with heavily contrasting light and dark spots separated by walls. Straying away from the level scene itself, we look at the backdrops. With vibrant colors and differing lighting, the scene really gets brought together by the presence of detailed pasteled coloring formations, despite there being an absence of many differing colors. Oh, and that's not even mentioning the amazing sound design. On another note, Towerfall was actually the first, at least to my knowledge, game of Maddy's to have advertising to aid with the distribution. And whilst the original trailer garnered quite a fair amount of views, with 252,000 at the time of writing the script, Towerfall would go on to be Maddy's very first breakout game, being received incredibly well from fans as well as the media. Towerfall did so well in fact that its fluid movement and precise platforming aspect, you don't get shot and die, and specifically the zip mechanic would actually go on to inspire another future project by Maddy, one whose influence and outreach is so unbelievably massive that it somehow implanted itself into one of the biggest communities on the entire planet. Alright, you knew it was coming. Introducing Celeste. Celeste is once again a platformer, however unlike Towerfall, it is exclusively a single-player experience, with its own absolutely amazing and incredibly emotional storyline. Also, unlike Towerfall, Celeste had little to no advertising throughout the majority of its lifetime, relying solely on word of mouth as distribution. Celeste as a game was created with Maddy's new development team, XOK Games or Extremely OK Games, an independent game studio consisting of her close friends. Celeste wouldn't always look how it does now, however, as the Pico 8 version of the game, created in a 4-day-long game jam, was its first and earliest predecessor. Shortly after, the idea of Celeste began to grow and grow until the Celeste we know and love was created. The narrative of Celeste, as stated by Maddy herself, was one which was produced from the inspiration with her own personal experiences with depression and mental health. Just from the narrative alone, this game has an incredibly tight balancing act to follow, as mental health is an incredibly serious topic, so I'll just try to sum up the important sections as quickly as possible, from opening, development, and resolution. The opening of the narrative begins in the setting of the Forsaken City. We play through the point of view of Madeline, a young woman struggling with mental illness who decides to climb Celeste Mountain. The journey to the top primarily takes place during the night, with the level scenes often using incredibly dark natural lighting, with the occasional pastel color used as well. The usage of colors in the background is a great representation of where Madeline is mentally. The darker the colors, the worse her mental state, and vice versa. Here's something to keep in mind. The mountain setting is a metaphor for depression. Climb the mountain and you're free from your depression. A simple concept that is so unbelievably difficult to get right, as mental health is not a game and should not be presented as one. In fact, Chapter 1 has no mention of mental health at all, as that begins in Chapter 2, Old Sight. Fast forward into Chapter 2's Old Sight, and the main antagonist of the game is presented to us, Madeline. Presented as a mainly purple, identical version of Madeline, Madeline's character is established as the representation of all of Madeline's fears as well as anxieties. Skipping forward to Chapter 5, we see the narrative begin to develop drastically, specifically at the ending. Chapter 5, Mirror Temple. Chapter 5's ending serves as a fake-out storyline resolution for the main narrative, with Madeline denouncing Madeline, the representation of her mental illness, saying that she's, quote, everything she needs to leave behind, end quote, leading to this incredibly powerful scene. The camera slowly pans up at a medium resolution to show the setting that Madeline finds herself in. The scene consists of neon northern lights and falling stars which illume in the background, complementing her blue aesthetic. With a glowing pastel lighting covering the scene, it just seems so positive, and yet something is off. The sound of the backing track builds, and it keeps on building. It builds to an uncomfortable amount, almost like yelling, when suddenly Madeline lashes out, her sprite literally reaching out of the text box due to her actions. Then, hair tendrils start filling the scene, as the once vibrant lights fade away into nothingness. All of this happening due to the principle of cause and effect. Madeline did nothing but try to push away her mental illness the entire story rather than confronting it head on. And in turn, Madeline snaps. The scene is so incredibly powerful because you can physically see Madeline completely screw up and take action the wrong way. This style of storytelling by Maddy Thorson ultimately shows us that she herself has experienced something similar to this before, something commonly referred to as gender dysphoria. See, while Celeste was intended to be a platformer about mental health, something Maddy Thorson realized shortly after the release of the final chapter of Celeste is that she, along with Madeline, was transgender. This is due to the fact that the way that Maddy Thorson felt, and the way Madeline's mental illness is portrayed, resonated heavily with those who have experienced gender dysphoria. Gender dysphoria is a condition where a person experiences significant distress or discomfort due to a mismatch between their gender identity and their gender assigned at birth. With Celeste releasing in 2018, where LGBT was becoming much more mainstream, fans and the media absolutely loved it. Celeste was received amazingly, and the reception for when the game first came out was nothing but fantastic. People all over the world, from straight people to those part of the LGBT community, would play Celeste. In fact, Celeste became so big that it won the Indie Game of the Year award in 2018, showing just how big of an influence it was. Celeste was Maddy Thorson's magnum opus, a story about her struggles with mental illness, with codes and conventions from all of her past games. Its development started off as a game jam concept, which then evolved into one of the most amazing story games within the entire platformer genre. So with that being said, what better way to resolve this video than to talk about the resolution of Celeste itself. Chapter 7's Reach for the Summit acts less like a level and more like an experience. Unlike the main story, Chapter 7 takes place during the day, meaning it's the first level with actually positively bright lighting. Chapter 7 is an absolutely amazing level with section-based music that has you running through every section of the entire game in one triumphant run of euphoria. The feeling of running through this level cannot be understated. Maddy Thorson did an absolutely amazing job making this level feel as rewarding as possible. Each section uses bright pastel colors with an equally bright pastel background. The music feels uplifting and energetic with motifs from every single area. The level oozes with personality, and the resolution of Chapter 7, where Madeline and Madeline sit atop the mountain looking off into the horizon, is truly a scene that speaks no less than 2,323 words. Anyways, with that being said, I hope you enjoyed the review, and thank you so much for watching.